Hello, my name is Michael Freeston. I'm Director of Quality Improvement at the Early Years Alliance, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to this session a group of friends, colleagues, and practitioners with whom I've had the honour to work with over several years. And I wanted to bring people together as we start Week of Play to just think about what we mean by play, how it's been affected during the pandemic, children's access to play, and also how play can feature in the movement back to, hopefully, a new normal. So it's with great pleasure I'd like to introduce, first of all, Cathy.
Hi, I'm Cathy Nutbrown, Professor of Education at the School of Education in Sheffield and President of Early Education.
Thank you. Annie.
Hello, I'm Anni McTavish. I'm an early years and creative arts consultant. I do a mixture of work in early years, both training, consultancy and workshops, and also lots of art projects in settings.
Thank you. Welcome. Helen?
Hi, I'm Helen Moylett. I'm also an early years consultant, and a few years ago now, I was centrally involved in developing the EYFS, and with my colleague Nancy, who is also here, we co-wrote the original Development Matters in 2012, and we've both been involved in all sorts of early years things ever since. I'm particularly interested in play and the characteristics of effective learning.
Thank you. And Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy Stewart. After long experience across sectors in private voluntary and school settings, been an advisor, local and national level, and as Helen said, writing, and most recently project lead for Birth to Five Matters.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Can I start, Cathy, with you, please? There are so many definitions and interpretations of play. I wonder if you'd share with us what's your particular favourite.
Well, as you can imagine, I've been around the houses on this one, Michael. The books on my shelves tell me that Piaget called play the work of childhood and the answer to how anything new comes about. Montessori agreed with him. She said that play is the work of a child. Vygotsky says something like, in play, a child always behaves beyond their average age about their daily behaviour, and in play, it's as though they were a head taller than themselves. My colleague Liz Wood talks about play being where children are in their own spaces where they can choose what they want to do and the players that they want to play with, free play and freely chosen by children. So policy tries to take it and direct it and make it and mould it and manipulate it, but real play for me is free play.
Smashing. Thank you very much. Annie.
Oh, I think this is a really tough question. And I think it's really complex. And I've taken ideas, I think, both from my three colleagues here, but also from some of the theorists out there. And I think the number one thing is that it's just really complex. And it isn't just one thing. It's just lots of different things. But I was really reminded of a talk I was at with both Helen and Nancy, actually quite a while ago now, and Professor Sue Rogers was talking. And one of the things she said in her definition about play was that play is also a feeling. And there was something about that just really grabbed me. And it just reminded me about the importance of relationships and about us knowing our children, who they are, what they bring to the setting, the relationship with the family as well, and then how we can plan for all sorts of wonderful experiences to support children's play.
Smashing. Thank you. Helen.
Well, I rather like Colin Trevarthen's definition of play being how we make sense of life through activity. And children are primed to make sense of their lives. That's what they come out of the womb wanting to do, making sense, making relationships, doing all those sorts of things. So for me, like Annie and Cathy, really, I think play is something that's it's flexible, it's spontaneous, and it's under the control of the child. It's something that belongs to the child, and it is highly emotionally connected to how they're feeling and their feelings of well-being, as well as how they're learning.
Smashing. Just picking up on that point of it belonging to the child. Nancy, can I come to you in terms of the conversations we often have in terms of the difference between play and playful activities?
Yes, there is quite a difference, because you can be very playful and have an idea of hands-on, active, maybe motivating because the materials children enjoy using, and set up an activity. But if it's the adult setting it up, then you've lost that whole aspect of it being open-ended and free and the child's choice. And so that feeling of openness and creativity, and it can go anywhere I want, is gone. So the play is gone. So if I say to you, let's make a brick tower, that's not play. Whereas if the child thinks, I'm going to play with these bricks and, oh, I have the idea of making a tower, then that's play. So it's about control, and whether the child sees it as mine, this is my thing I'm doing, and I can stop whenever I like, and I can change it whenever I like.
Thank you. That's really interesting, because that leads us to a point that I know, that balance that we always talk about in early years provision between that which is adult-led and that which is child-led. And Helen, I've heard you speak at conferences in the past, before, when we still had conferences, before the pandemic, about concerns about threats to play. I wonder if you could just spend a minute or two explaining what you mean by that.
Well, if we think about the fact that actually all mammals play, you know, and we are a very highly sophisticated form of mammals as species. And in fact, I mean, there's plenty of research which says that play is actually one of the vehicles for us being so highly adaptable and able to be so creative. And we know that, you know, that drive to play is so important, and that in most species, adults understand that their children playing, or their young playing, I suppose we should say, is how they gain the skills they need to be effective in that species, effective adult tigers or mice or whatever they might be. And we seem to be gradually, via policy at least, drifting away from that understanding that actually, you know, we need to facilitate children's play, and that if children haven't had sufficient play opportunities at home or wherever they've been, you know, when they come into settings, that one of the prime responsibilities of practitioners is to ensure that children have opportunities as well as time and space and resources to play with playful practitioners. And of course, one of the big threats to play at the moment has been COVID for many children, because they've had very restricted space very often. You know, for a long time, things like playgrounds, etc., were closed, and, you know, many children were at home, and if they were self-isolating or whatever, at home in very small, squashed circumstances very often. So those are threats to play. And I think the policy formalisation of the EYFS, which is gradually creeping, you know, that policy creep that sees the national curriculum becoming more and more dominant in early years if we don't push back against it, which I think, you know, in early years we are constantly having to do. I mean, this is not a new thing, that's always been the way, you know, but at the moment it's really, you know, for instance, we've still got in the reformed EYFS framework, we now have play is essential, and it's still there, that the whole little paragraph about play being essential for children's learning. But what has gone is that each area of learning must be delivered through play, and that is no longer there. Now, I think language matters, even though, you know, yes, the sentence, etc., about play is essential is still there. So I think that lack of understanding from policymakers, coupled with, and I hate to say this in a way when we're celebrating, you know, the richness of our sector and what we all do, etc., but coupled with the constant, as we have seen over the years, downgrading of qualifications in early years, in the sense that we have fewer and fewer people who are well qualified and have done courses that are equipping them with all the things about child development and how play works with young children coming into settings. So, you know, setting managers have a big job to do very often with trying to make sure that all the staff understand why this is so important. So
thank you. Now, I get the sense that workforce development is something Cathy might want to come in on.
Why would you think that, Michael? I think investing in the workforce is essential. You would expect me to say that, wouldn't you? But investing in the workforce so that courses that are initial courses that entitle people to work with young children really teach them how to trust children with their play, and how to patiently watch what children do when they play, so that as practitioners they can gain some insights into what they see rather than assume that they think they know. When we watch children play, we don't know what they're doing. We can have a good guess based on the kinds of things we've seen other children do in the past. But unless we listen to what they say, we don't know whether they built a bridge or whatever. So I think time for practitioners who are in initial training to really think about play and watch play is really, really essential. And qualifications and initial qualifications in CPD have got to be a big factor going forward. I've seen some fantastic things during the pandemic where practitioners have really used what they know, freed from the EYFS. They've used what they know and what they know families need, what they know children need, and they've pushed the limits because they haven't been restricted. So I think, you know, if the EYFS if it was okay to let go of some of the EYFS during the pandemic, then maybe it's okay to let go of some of the restrictive elements of it going forward. Some children thrive in smaller groups, so there's a lesson there.
Yes, I mean, I think there's a lot of room in the EYFS to go way beyond it, to do what you know is right about play. The current revision is worrying in that they've downgraded play, as Helen said in that one statement about it being the vehicle, but also the characteristics of effective learning start with playing and exploring. And they've totally misunderstood that. Instead of saying, understand how children learn, which is through playing, they say, understand what children are learning, you know, what they learn, and look at the rates of learning. That's not about the wonderful exploratory and thinking side of play that we need to help both practitioners and parents to really hang on to.
Thank you.
Chris
Annie,
Athy opened my eyes to Chris Athy opened my eyes to watching children, because she would say to me, what are they doing? What are they doing? What, you know, how do you know what they're thinking? And the watching is just so important.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking about a couple of things as you were speaking, Cathy, and that sort of thinking about practitioner development and those qualifications and training, and also the sort of the next step for me often being in settings is just time to talk with practitioners and for them to have that professional dialogue and to really support all of us, team, to tune into what actually might be going on and just to have the conversation about the play and what the possibilities are. And then as Nancy was talking about those self-regulatory skills and the characteristics, and you know, just recently having been in a setting where a lot of that is really lacking at the moment, and in fact, so we have to come to that first and really support the children's development in that through really good quality play where the practitioners are really at the children's level, in order for any of the other learning then to be built on top of that. So, you know, it's just really recognizing that there's, you know, it's not called the foundation stage for nothing. We have those really important sort of stages that we have first.
Thank you. Something Helen touched on earlier on, and I'd like to sort of just take other views on it, is what do you think has happened to play during the pandemic? I think Cathy's point is an interesting one, that actually there have been some opportunities that have been created. And certainly in the Alliance, we've done a lot of online provision directly with parents, and the feedback, it has been tremendous in terms of, I didn't realize this is what he is learning when he is playing this. I mean, it was music to my ears, really. And any other reflections on the last year and a half?
I think there's been a real, I mean, I've been bowled over by the work that practitioners have done and their creativity. And I really like that thing about sort of doing away with some of the rules or the things we have to be doing or think we have to be doing under the sort of EYFS, and seeing practitioners' creativity to reach out to parents and also to really have a more in-depth dialogue about what's helpful for families and what they feel they need, from really sort of basic levels of, say, delivering nappies or putting them in touch with a food bank, to then also thinking about the sort of playful activities or experiences they can support families to do. And so some things have been, I think some children's experiences of play have been really good, and I think there will be also many other children who perhaps had much less of that, who I'm certainly wanting to support practitioners to really help and develop within the settings I'm in at the moment.
Thank you.
I think some of the things that Helen mentioned about, for many, many families, lack of space, extra stress in the household, you need a comfortable emotional climate to really enter into play. So there will have been a lot of barriers. I think also sometimes the things that parents who were trying to do educating at home might have had some misleading information or support around play, because it's been playful activities that we were talking about earlier, rather than valuing play. And that's a whole nother agenda to, watch what the child is doing, make sure there's lots of open-ended materials and time and interested engagement by the adult, and to be wondering, what's this about in the child's mind? What's the question they're pondering? And in some ways, when we've got, extra online learning, what can they send you other than watch this or download this? And that's very different from real play. So in some ways, we've lost track of that. And it's much, well, I think someone was at Annie, you said it's just complex, was a real cornerstone of the definition. It is too complex to just hand it to somebody and say, understand this and go and support it and help it to flourish. Yeah.
But I think that the key, sorry.
No, go
on, Helen.
I think the key is that close observation of children, isn't it? Which Cathy and Annie both talked about before, because actually the key to understanding children's play is always being fascinated by the children themselves, because they are the ones who will show you. I mean, it's what this Chesworth calls their funds of knowledge, isn't it? They come with so much. They come with experiences, which I think is at the moment, we're in a difficult position in many settings, because the government is preaching catch up. That is the terminology they use all the time. Catch up, catch up, catch up. But actually, I understand what they mean in that, maybe children have missed out. I mean, we're talking about maybe some children missing out on play opportunities, for instance. But actually, it's all about formalising things. Everything that they've, the little bits of guidance that the government have published about it are all very focused on things like literacy and mathematics and that sort of thing, even for early years, the few bits we've had. And I don't like that catch-up agenda. I think what we should be talking about is, the whole notion of a recovery curriculum, and thinking about, well, where does anything ever start when a child comes in any form of transition? Always with the child. In early years, that's always where we start, with the child at the centre. And actually, if we observe those children and follow their play interests and find out more about them, tuning in, all of that attunement, so that we can work out things. And we can work out, first and foremost, things about their well-being. I mean, it's back to the Ferry Lavers stuff about, well-being and involvement being the absolute key to learning. And actually, if we observe that and observe their play, and don't always try and join in, don't always try and make it into a learning opportunity, or something like that. Just find out about the children, get to know them. That doesn't work with baseline. It doesn't work with catch up. You have to do whatever this latest government, I'm not going to name them because I, get angry. But, the latest government catch up on, vocabulary. These children have missed out on vocabulary. Okay, maybe they have missed out on vocabulary, but is that the most important thing in the world?
Well, it is very important, not perhaps as important as their personal and social well-being, which is hugely supported through play. But even if you think vocabulary is really where it's at, how are you going to support that? Through engaging playful activities where language happens, and they've got things to talk about that they want to talk about. It's very different from saying, let's read this book and learn the words that are in it. So
okay, well, we've talked in terms of the the impact of the pandemic, let's just see if we can explore a bit more in terms of how play can be part of the solution in that sense. I'll come to Annie and then Cathy. And for that, what role can play make in terms of bringing us back to some form of normal?
I mean, I think it's going to be absolutely number one and totally crucial, really. And I think, one of the things that I've really observed in the settings that I've been in is that it's really important not to try and go too fast and get caught up with this catch-up agenda. And I've got a really helpful practice example, I hope, in that I've been in a setting recently, and one of the things they'd had to do, as many did, was close the sandpit down for safety. And they decided a couple of weeks ago to open the sandpit. But of course, those children who were back in the setting had actually had no experience of playing in the sand. So it was bedlam. And sand got in the hair, in the eyes. It was, and the children had no skills because either they hadn't had the experience, but nor had they got to watch older children who were skillful players. And so actually, in order to keep things safe, they had to shut the sandpit and then have the conversation as the team to think, how do we manage this safely? What's appropriate?
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and it was great. And also because parents were very concerned, children were going home with a head full of sand that was taking hours with different hairstyles. But and so responding sensitively and respectfully to parents' concerns, they bought little shower caps that were, sturdy fabric and not too hot to protect the hair. But also they realized that play needed to be modeled. Practitioners had to be there, like Nancy's saying, wonderful opportunities to provide language and communication to support the children's social skills, negotiating, but also just to actually have an experience of playing and enjoyment and it being okay. Really not the focus being on hand washing or having to stay away from people, but learning how to come together again as a group. So not going too fast is really important. Who are these children? What do they need? And then building on that. And just keeping on talking, I think, together as a team about what do our children need in terms of quality play experiences.
Cathy?
I saw lots of hopscotch. I saw lots of hopscotch locally in the early part of the very first lockdown in March 2020, and examples of intergenerational hopscotch. Many of the older adults were better at it than the children who hadn't discovered this wonderful childhood game. And there was hopscotch in various parts of the country. There's a website that shows these wonderful
Is there extreme hopscotching now? Or
all along the street. One setting that I know of delivered packets of chalk to families with a suggestion as to how they might get out. The streets were quiet, but what have we learned? How does it help recovery? Play is essential. Children weren't equal in the pandemic. Some had their right to play really enhanced. They had lots of time with their families, lots of one-to-one adult time, and many children didn't have that. Without play of all kinds, there won't be any real recovery. Outdoor space, investing in outdoor spaces and trees, rethinking of the curriculum, again, emphasising free play, practitioners who really understand play and trust children to develop their play, and deep involvement of families in that. I think if we're going to have recovery in the early years, I agree with Helen about the kind of nonsense, in a sense, of this issue of catching up. We are who we are, where we are. We have all gained things and lost things as human beings during this pandemic. And I think without being able to play, even as adults, those things that we enjoy playfully as adults that we've missed out on, you can only enjoy so many Zoom quizzes, and then you think, okay, I want another dimension to this. But investing in play and investing in the adults, and I'm talking about families as well as practitioners who support play, is going to be essential. And keeping it small groups, small settings.
Helen?
Yes, I think, listening to parents, I think, is really important. And one of the things that strikes me is that whenever I see a survey, you know, from various organisations recently about what parents want, they always talk about more play, more creative approaches to curriculum. You know, I haven't seen any survey of parents recently where the majority have said, yes, they want more literacy and maths catch up for their children. You know, so it's a sort of trying to get policymakers to understand, and I don't quite know how we can do this apart from, you know, keeping on basically, and doing things like the Early Years Coalition has done recently, of coming together across our early years sector and, you know, developing things like Birth to Five Matters as the non-statutory guidance, which does have a really good section on play and self-regulation and all the things that, you know, inclusion and equalities and all the things that really matter as the basis of what we do in the EYFS. But I think, you know, listening to those parents and in settings, not thinking of the EYFS as a straitjacket, but as Nancy hinted earlier, thinking about how we can go beyond. It does say in the EYFS that the characteristics are important, that play is essential. Now we take those bits. I mean, you know, I'm a great advocate for choosing the bits that we really like and really going with those and saying, yeah, we're doing this. This is the EYFS. You know, we don't need to be all this other stuff, which isn't in the statutory framework, saying I have to do 3 observations a day. There's nothing in there that says anything like that, is rubbish. And actually, when we've got children who have had, you know, who need play, then that's what we should be giving them. They have a right to it and they need it.
Okay, picking that up then, Nancy, moving this on to you. We have the EYFS as a framework. It's not a straitjacket. Give me 1, maybe 2, and I'm going to come to all of you on this, practical things around that you would say to practitioners to supporting children and their parents with regard to play as we come out of the pandemic.
Well, I think one thing is to look at your provision and opportunity for children in terms of, do you have spaces that are open-ended, that children can access things for themselves and make their own choices and move things around, so they are the planners, it's their agenda. So think about your provision and your time so that you're not constantly interrupting them or saying, come over here and do what I want you to do. So that's all part of that environment, and how you engage with them. So think about, do we have a common understanding as a staff about how we are alongside and when we are with play? And then involving parents, I think it's, well, a couple of things. I think wonderful to invite parents in to play with and alongside and have the conversation so parents start to see what's really going on when children are playing. So they're engaged together, and then the knowledgeable practitioner can point out what the child is getting from that in terms of their confidence, in terms of their motivation, in terms of, you know, all of those self-directed things that really are about resilience and going on to learn, not the letter sounds, you know. So sort of sharing those messages with parents in an informal way, but just so thrilled about what children are doing and sharing that excitement with parents.
Smashing. Thank you, Annie.
Oh, I mean, I would agree with everything that Nancy's just said. And I think just to add a little something else in terms of provision, because one of the things we've looked at in one of the settings I've been in recently is also not having too much, because what we realized was it quite quickly got overwhelming for the children to have too much choice, and that actually just carefully auditing and thinning out the environment actually made choice for play and free play, made it more possible, and not too overwhelming for the children. And again, I think that communication, just, you know, very informal ways to share with families and parents what their child is really enjoying, and maybe just adding a tiny bit in about what some of the connections might be to learning. And I also think as the practitioner is to what, you know, it is to take that time to watch and take the chance to join in some of the time and really support play, you know, to really become a good partner in play. and to take those little risks sometimes and practice that skill with the children that you're with, and you know, hold underneath that real attunement and building and developing that relationship with that child, like really tuning into what a child's play cues might be, you know, that invitation to join. Yeah.
Thank you. Cathy?
I think it's probably the same as I would have said pre-pandemic. I've done a lot of work with many settings around the country on home visiting, so that parents have time to talk to the practitioner one-to-one. They can together watch the child. They might go out for a walk and look at print or leaves or whatever, discover local spaces that some parents think they haven't got a right to use and go into. So working with parents on a one-to-one as well as in the setting is really important. Some of the home visiting projects I've been involved in, not a single parent has ever missed a home visit. They might miss group setting meetings, but I'm astounded that parents will go to great lengths to rearrange, or because they actually, parents are interested in their children, they want to know. And when professionals share their professional knowledge and theory in an accessible way with parents, it's really exciting. And parents say things like, does that count as learning? And it's wonderful. One example of hopscotch, I'm not hung up on hopscotch, but
Just a bit.
I heard a mum call her 5-year-old in from hopscotch saying, you need to do your number work. I wanted to rush to her, but I didn't have a mask and I couldn't be socially distant and say, look, this is the number work. But understanding that there's a freedom to this, that playing with numbers and that glorious bit where they write the number 4 the wrong way round, but they know roughly what a 4 looks like. That all counts. And when parents understand that kind of thing and children are playing with signs and symbols and making their own, it's wonderful. So working with parents on home learning, using home visits, I've heard fantastic stories of doorstep visits now. So the number of practitioners who've done incredible things, not to be daunted. They found a way through to be COVID safe. And I think we have fantastic provision and we have fantastic practitioners in this country. And it's about finding ways of helping other settings learn from those who do it well. My idea that initially qualified people should visit good and outstanding settings to really learn from good practice, so that they're not just repeating the things that they've been taught that might not be so good, but to really learn and see good practice and to understand when something sometimes looks like chaos. It's about children exploring. Susan Addicks never had a problem with it, so I don't know why 100 years later.
Final word, Helen, yourself, anything to add?
Just very quickly, I'd say to practitioners that one of the big things that will help children play is outdoor space. It doesn't matter if it's not huge, but actually with some loose parts, as they're often called, where children have got equipment that isn't expensive, that you're not worried about, that they can put together in all sorts of different ways and just play, and you can observe what they're doing. And in terms of working with parents, I mean, I agree with what everybody else has said. And Cathy's taken me back to my days as a homeschool liaison teacher, where I used to be the person doing all the home visiting. And again, parents never missed them, ever.
Right, that's fascinating.
But I would just add as well, if you want parents to get involved, and they're the sort of parents who are working, and, I feel, for my early years practitioner colleagues who can never be the ones who are involved in the setting because they're involved in their own setting, things like conversation bags, sending things, inexpensive resources home with no agenda about you've got to read this book and you've got to tell us how it went or anything like that. But actually these are just things, with some preparation with parents, but actually these are things to talk about and see what your child does with them. Don't get in there and start playing yourself, wait for the child and then see what comes, what conversation comes and what play comes. And I think those are really helpful. But anyway, I'm going to stop there.
Well, I'm really sorry. We did say we would keep this to about 35 minutes. I get the sense we could just talk about this for the rest of the day, but that would be difficult for people to follow when they download on the website. It just remains for me to say thank you all so much for sharing such intelligent, lively and informed considerations. And clearly, if nothing else, we all sign up to Cathy's campaign to make hopscotch an Olympic sport sometime very time soon for all of its training. Thank you very much. My huge thanks to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.